Hi, I'm Jim Shaw from the Colonial Times Magazine. I'm joined by Caitlin Kelleher, the editor of the Lexington Minuteman, and welcome to another installment of Coffee with the Candidates. 2015 we'll have 3 candidates running for 2 slots on the school committee. The election is Monday, March 2nd, so please mark your calendars and make sure you register to vote and that you get out and vote. Today, we are joined by Jesse Steigerwald, who is a 2-term member of the Lexington School Committee who's running for re-election. So with that, I'd like to welcome Jesse. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
No, we're happy to do it.
Absolutely.
And you know, we're prepping for a storm, so you know, if it isn't one thing, it's another. But I wanted to maybe take this opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the things that you're dealing with as a member of the school committee, and as this election draws near, some of the things that may be of concern to voters. I know there are a lot of issues out there, and you know, one of the more prominent issues is got to do with the school buildings and capital projects and improvements. I know the architect that this school department hired has talked about how this year, the next year may be okay, but as we get closer to 2019, there'll be some challenges in terms of space. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We are looking at a pretty solid forecast that we will have rising enrollment over the next 5 years. In fact, over the past 5 years, we've added capacity for an additional 500 students in the recent projects we've done, between building the new Estabrook and adding space at Bridge and Bowman and adding a 2-phase addition at the high school. So we're getting better at adding space. We have had the luxury of a volunteer citizen group, the Enrollment Working Group, working with Dr. Ash. And those citizens have worked really hard to try to solidify what do they think will happen over the next 5 years. And what they think will happen is we could see as many as 500 more students. Their projections have that mathematician wiggle room. So, you know, it could be 250 at the elementary level, could be up to 500. And what that means is we've been working with Phil Pinelli at SMMA Architects, and they have gone through and given us some concepts. Where could we add space? Those concepts are not solid enough to say, from my point of view and my colleagues, let's just do this. Let's build here, here, here. Because we need to figure out each property what the right amount of space to build is. So I'm going to dig down one level in detail. We all agree unanimously that we need to address Hastings. In our original school master plan, Hastings was next. It's the remaining of the 6 elementary schools that has not had a renovation or major upkeep. In fact, we've kept up a little bit, but you could argue we've deferred some projects. Dr. Ash had originally thought enrollment would decline. That was not accurate. So we need to address Hastings either way. When we address it, though, we have to decide how big it could be. If we build the same size we just built Estabrook, 600 students, that would add at least 100 more spots at Hastings. What if we built to 650? Is it possible? We don't know. There's wetland on the property. We have fields. We have to work with the town to figure out how big could it be. If you build a slightly bigger Hastings, maybe some of the other concepts that the architect showed us for adding space at Harrington could be smaller, more affordable. So that's really what we're looking at. And these things all really relate to each other. Where will the pre-K go? Right now it's at Harrington. Should it stand alone? Should it go to a new Hastings? Those are things that we're going to be asking the community to support us in town meeting to fund further architectural drawings. They're called schematics. And once we see those, I think we'll be in a better place to recommend where should the space go and how quickly should we build it.
One of the things I know about this project is it takes time and it takes a lot of planning. How do you start to sell it to voters now? Because it's going to have a big price tag, and tax rates just went up, and tax rates went down, but tax bills went up. How do you start this process of selling it now?
I think there's at least 3 things I think we can do. One is keep this on the front burner so that people are talking about it. Some people come to our meetings and they're very, I would say, actively engaged. They're really paying attention to this issue. Other people, it's going to hit them by surprise at some point, and they will feel like it came from nowhere. It's not. It's just been an iterative process. So I think we have to ask people in town to pay attention and watch the Minuteman, watch and see what's happening each meeting. The other thing I think we can do is try to hold more open hearings on the topic. We've tried to use more hearings over the past years as a school committee, and it does allow people to come forward and share their point of view. The other thing that's really important is the work we do with other boards and committees. So last week we had a summit with the Board of Selectmen, the Appropriation Committee, and the Capital Expenditure Committee. Those meetings are key because we just saw a model that would show if we did all the school projects we proposed, plus fire, plus police, how much would that potentially cost the average homeowner in town? And I know for me, those figures were not ones I'm comfortable with. They really show what a burden it would be. So, as a school committee, we can work with architects to see how can we control those costs. But we need to work with those finance committees and figure out, is the rainy day fund something we could use? Can we mitigate some of that tax burden increase? And as you said, the key is really, it's not likely we're going to build all of them at exactly the same time. We need to figure out the sequencing and understand what the impact would be.
I know part of this will be going in and talking with the new superintendent because Dr. Ash is there for another 5 months, if I do the math right. How do you bring the new superintendent in to be caught up to speed and also hear her voice and her experience on something like this?
I'm so glad you raised it because some of the creative solutions that have been brought forward by citizens or staff members or school committee members include things like, could you shift the way we have our elementary schools set up? Could you have different grade levels paired at different schools? That's a pretty significant change, and it's something Dr. Ash didn't feel comfortable with. We do need to know what the new superintendent is comfortable with because she will have to lead us through this process. She has had major capital projects as well, so she will bring her experience to the conversation, which will be helpful. She also has, this is Dr. Mary Chakowski we're talking about. She also, part of why I was so impressed with her is she has this clear, woven into every fiber of her being process that she does in her community, where she wants to hear from all stakeholders. So not just school-age parents, but community members. And I think she fully appreciates we need the entire town to support whatever plan we come up with. So I think she's going to want some of the time when she first gets here to be hearing from people, and then probably come forward with her own recommendation. One thing that we need to work out right now is the transition plan. So a couple of us have asked to put it on the agenda to have an open conversation about how will we involve her. I think we're each having some, beginning conversations with her. We don't want to overburden her while she's doing her full-time job, but we also don't want to set things in stone before she's here.
Right. And that kind of leads to, a topic that was a little bit controversial in terms of, towards the end of his tenure, Dr. Ash sort of leading the charge, and the school committee was somewhat sort of off to the side, letting him do what he wants to do. Do you think that'll change a little bit? And I'm trying to be unfair to Dr. Ash in that regard, but we have an opportunity now for a school committee to work sort of in tandem with a new superintendent, sort of setting the agenda and making sure we're firing on all cylinders. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
I can. Actually, it's part of what I'm so excited, and part of why I decided to run again was the opportunity to work with a new superintendent who has, different strengths, some similar strengths. She's certainly very capable of managing a large budget, a large school district with many problems. She's got her instructional curriculum background. She's actually been a superintendent more years than Dr. Ash was when he came here. So I know she's solid on the running a school district. But it is an opportunity to work with someone who has a different idea of leadership. And one of the questions she answered in our public interview was one I asked, which was, some people will say you have a choice. You can have a strong superintendent and a weak school committee, a strong school committee and a weak superintendent, and what are your views on that? Is it possible to have strength in both? And she immediately, without hesitation, answered yes, and that is the best way. And that is how I've always felt. When I came on the school committee, I agree. It sounds a little hard, but I can take it. I feel like when I first came on, there was a perception and maybe even an atmosphere on the committee that, the superintendent really was the expert in everything and does lead, and your job is to support and pass that message along. And that's not my personal view. I think you should respect the superintendent, learn from the superintendent, but I think it needs to be a two-way conversation. I think everything we do, we're ultimately asking the community to pay for, and I think the community, parents, and people who don't have kids in the schools, they have a voice. They need to actually communicate what they want for their schools. That causes them to be engaged, feel proud, and it's just how I think a public school system should work. And I think we've made steps in that direction with Dr. Ash. I think he's moved a little bit. I think we've had open, transparent evaluations that didn't seem to be happening when I got on the school committee, and I feel that I took initiative in saying we need to do this. And I think that, partially open meeting law changed. So I'm not blaming anyone. The old way, I don't know how you evaluate it, but somehow you did it. But open meeting law really requires you to do it in public, and I think that's appropriate. I'm trained as a lawyer. I may be more comfortable than some other people in advocating in public. I'm not used to the TV cameras either, but I've gotten better at that. And I think you have to cross the line and decide, the reason it's public, I might feel uncomfortable. The reason it's public is because people have a right to know how their tax dollars are spent in a public system. And so when you evaluate the superintendent, that needs to be something that people hear. In fact, when I got on, I asked to put back the 360-degree evaluations, which we did do, and that meant we used SurveyMonkey, kind of low tech, but we put it out to the entire community and said, what are your views? And we had a little disagreement at first about doing that, because some people feel like, well, should someone get to write in if they don't actually work directly with the superintendent? And my feeling is survey results are something you take as one thread of feedback. But I think we've made strides. And I think with Dr. Chakowski, she's just starting at a different level. She seems very comfortable hearing from people, taking feedback, and will be exciting.
Great.
What are some of the goals you'll want to see? I mean, you don't get to make the goals for the new superintendent by yourself, but
Right.
what are some of those things that you'll put on the table as suggestions and goals?
What's really nice is you don't make the goals by yourself, but the current composition, Margaret and Sandro and Judy and Bill, who Judy joined last March and Bill in November, is we've been very unanimous in the big broad goals. So we do annually establish district goals. And what we do is we say, here's the big things we want you to work on. We've really had quite a harmonious experience coming up with those. One that's been very important to me is to address student stress. And Dr. Ash had originally proposed for a district goal to address social and emotional needs for students at risk. And I advocated to include all students, because I think we've really seen feedback from our community, from the Youth Behavior Risk Survey, that it's not a pocket of students that are experiencing stress. It's all of our students. So, with Dr. Ash here, we move that up to the level of informal concerns to an actual district goal. So it's embedded in our plan. And those district goals, they're called annual. You're not going to finish solving student stress in 1 year. So for me, going forward, if elected and working with Dr. Chakowski, she's very aware of this. And in her interviews, she had read the survey results, she had read our subcommittee's report, and she's enthusiastic about addressing it. So that's something that I know I'm eager to work on. Technology was also one of our goals. Technology has been one of our goals for many years. When I was first elected, we were spending $200,000 a year in technology. And as a parent, I was a PTA president at an elementary school at the time. We were literally coming to the school committee and arguing about, could we please donate mice? There weren't enough mice. People don't even know what mice are anymore. We were coming in saying, please let us give the mice because they're not getting in the kids' hands and the teachers' hands fast enough. Part of my job in the school committee has been to advocate and follow that thread through, and I'm really proud that we've increased the budget. $400,000, $600,000, $800,000. We're up to $1.3 million in next year's budget, which sounds like a lot of money, but you're talking about getting closer to 7,000 students and more than 1,000 employees. And what we're doing now that's so helpful is it's not just buy a bunch of technology. It's train the teachers so that they actually can use it, find professional development time that they can practice. They need to integrate these excellent tools. They have to integrate it into their actual lesson plan. And there's challenges with it. But these are things I think I want to keep working on. But fortunately, I'm not alone because the committee has been unified. And that process of setting your annual district goals, that's your chance to, we disagree sometimes. And everything can't be the top priority. But
That's not necessarily unhealthy either, I don't think.
I don't either. I mean, raise your hand if at home over the dinner table you don't disagree about whether school should be open tomorrow or not. I mean, tomorrow's a blizzard as we film this, so I think everyone's going to say, I'm not so sure about tomorrow. But you I'm stopping Stop and Shop all the time, or Wilson Farm, and people have very different point of view about the math curriculum, or about, I won't even go through the list, everything.
Like foreign languages,
Everything.
music.
So having a school committee that can reach consensus but go through pros and cons, I think that's healthy and transparent.
Okay. As we mentioned at the beginning of this is you're now sort of completing your second term. So people will be out there wondering, okay, as somebody who's finished 2 terms, you talk about accomplishments. What do you think are among your most notable accomplishments with 2 terms in the school committee?
It has been an intense 6 years. I have had the pleasure of giving quite a bit of time to school committee. I also worked on the town's 300th anniversary. And so there's some places where that overlapped. So I want to give one example. The superintendent evaluation process has been the thing I'm probably most proud of, trying to get that to be more transparent, annual. I've shared my independent, we do separate evaluations and then they're synthesized into one, but I think it's good for the public to read each of our evaluations and also see how they're synthesized. So that process I'm probably very proud of, because I think it brings back the role, the school committee plays a role. We're not a rubber stamp. We can be supportive while also offering constructive feedback. I think that's what we should do. I'm also really proud that, I talked about our master plan before. It was pretty shocking. I was actually on a vacation. I rarely take them, but I was away when the PCBs were found at Estabrook. And I know kids in every single school. They all feel like people I am responsible for in their family. And families were very frightened. I am very proud of the way the school committee worked together to put in the time to hear the concerns, work with the EPA, hire a contractor. We all learned about toxicity levels. It was a very intense process. But the entire community of Lexington, to your question, we were able to explain what was going on, and the entire community stepped forward to pass the debt exclusion to build that new school. So, that is a major project, not something you see coming up. It's part of why I'm confident going into this new building phase. We've just been building, so I know we can do it. I want to give you an example about curriculum that kind of ties the 300th to the town. When I got on the school committee, it was shortly after really the override had failed, the earlier override. And as a parent, it's part of what got me involved in school committee in the first place, watching the cuts. So elementary foreign language was cut. Technology positions were cut. Technology was cut. And many other things. Parent fees went up. When I got on the school committee, there was no elementary social studies curriculum coordinator. We had one at the elementary level for science, math, and for English. And I know there were parents and teachers who felt like we weren't really getting to social studies. What a curriculum coordinator does is they tie together like everyone at 4th grade at all 6 elementary schools and make sure everyone is getting a similar curriculum. It's really important the way we do things today. Teachers feel so pressed by state mandates and frameworks and test giving. They can't always step outside and say, okay, what should we teach this year in social studies? So this is one where Dr. Ash and I think sometimes we've debated the most in public, but I think we've also often moved forward the furthest. And that was one where I know I was alone, but I said, I really think for what you've told us about how important these people are, we should have it in social studies. We live in Lexington, Massachusetts. I mean, right. Buckman Tavern's right there. And we had stopped going on field trips there. Right. Anyway, ultimately, he and I agreed. We hired someone in that position. And not only was she able to do this curriculum review and integrate back our local history with the state frameworks, but she was also able to work with the middle school curriculum coordinator and during the 300th bring back mock town meeting. It's something that had been in 5th grade, was gone, and it's in 8th grade. And it allowed me to cross over between what I learned about curriculum. School committee members do not dictate curriculum, but we can advocate for a person who will then advocate for what's appropriate. They're the experts at that, but we can help get the resources. And mock town meeting for me has been something, I'm wearing my button, it's coming up.
Right.
March 16th, townwide. All 8th grade students get to do this now, and it's embedded in their curriculum. And citizens who are in town meeting, our moderator, our board of selectmen, school committee members, go into classrooms. And I cannot tell you how exciting it is for me, because that's exactly why I started volunteering in the first place.
My first campaign for town meeting was when I was a senior in high school. So I can appreciate that, and it's an important part of understanding how this government operates. We've got about a minute left, believe it or not, so I don't know if there's anything you'd like to finish with, or maybe there's something.
Yeah, I think you should take it. See, what do you want voters to know about you, either going forward or what you've done?
I think the most important thing is I actually started out volunteering in high school, in schools. My mom was a teacher, but our high school had a program where you go across the street and volunteer in elementary school. And it was really exciting for me to see someone learn and to be part of that process and to help a teacher in a classroom. And I haven't really changed. I mean, my kids were here, I volunteered in all of the elementary schools, and I see myself mostly as a school volunteer. I am on the school committee. I do have the professional background as an advocate. I think I'm good at structuring arguments and communicating. But what excites me and what makes me want to continue is I truly feel like I have a connection then to the children in our town and their families and the staff people who support them, to see that spark, to see the students learn. That's what motivates me. And sometimes we'll have some tough arguments about what the best way is to do it, but that's what excites me. And if I'm elected again, that is what I will give to the town, is my time put toward that end of promoting student learning for everyone.
Excellent. Well, Jessie, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you both.
And we wish you all the best on March 2nd. And I'd like to remind everybody that the election is actually Monday, March 2nd. So with that, Jessie, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.